Good morning, everyone. Today we are going to be talking about cicadas. Now, cicadas are an insect that we don't really find a lot around here, but if you ever get the travel bug, haha, that was funny. If you ever decide to travel the world, you're going to find a lot of places where cicadas live.
This is from my bug collection inside the shed, and this is the underside of an adult cicada. Let's get a little side shot. You can see that it's got really lovely green wings, but they're also very clear. Big old eyes on the side of its head. That's right here and here. 6 legs. Here's another picture of a cicada from a book. Very green, very cool. Now cicadas you're normally going to find, when you find them, they're normally going to be the size of like a large paper clip, maybe even a little bit bigger. You might be thinking, what on earth is this cicada doing to this other brown thing? And we will get to that in just a little bit.
There are a couple other pictures of cicadas so that you can get a better understanding of what we're talking about here today. So in the world, there are apparently more than 3,000, that's a lot, of different kinds of cicadas, which fall into two main categories. The annual cicadas, which you would see every single year, and then the periodical cicadas, which spend most of their time, most of their lives, underground and only emerge every 10 years or so. So those annual cicadas can live 2 to 5 years, whereas the periodical cicadas can live up to 17 years. They can almost vote. Now, the annual cicadas can be found throughout the world. You're generally going to find them in climates that are a little bit more humid or have more rainfall. Whereas the periodical cicadas, you pretty much only find them in North America, on the central part of North America and the eastern side. So we're in West North America, right? We're in the western side of the country, and we unfortunately don't actually have cicadas here, but thought it'd be a fun bug or insect for us to look at nonetheless. So it's just too dry here. We don't get them here. So the life cycle of a cicada is quite bizarre. Not bizarre in like the grand scheme of insects, but bizarre in that it's a pretty long process, whereas a lot of insects will just kind of live and die, kind of in the same breath. Very short lives, whereas the cicadas, especially remember those periodical cicadas, can live up to 17 years. So their life cycle has 3 stages: egg, nymph, and adult. Very similar to the life cycle of a praying mantis, right? They had an egg, a nymph, and adult. They don't go through that pupal stage or that pupa stage where they have this like big change. They're kind of born looking almost like adults. So here are some pictures of the life cycle. We've got the egg, the nymph, which is going to be that kind of creepy looking bug thing, and then the adult is going to have the wings. So the female cicada will lay up to 400 eggs. Again, just like the praying mantises lay up to 400 eggs. Are they related? No. They lay up to 400 eggs, but they do it in different areas, which is very clever. So they'll lay, 12 eggs here in this leaf, 12 eggs over on this twig, 12 eggs over here, 12 eggs over here. And they do this to limit the devastation if a predator were to come and try and eat the eggs. Because a lot of other insects will eat other insects' eggs. And that's like a nice source of protein. It's a great, easy find of food. The food doesn't run away from you because they're eggs, right? So the cicada mama will lay her eggs in a bunch of different spots so that if a predator does come and eat the eggs in one area, it hasn't devastated, it hasn't taken all of the eggs, which is a pretty clever thing to do. So once they hatch, the cicada nymphs will immediately drop down out of whatever they're in, a tree, a plant, and they'll drop down into the soil. And they're going to start burrowing into the ground. Now, they will live there, if they're an annual cicada, for maybe a year or so. Could be up to 2 years. And if they're a periodical cicada, they'll live there underground, not coming out of the ground, for 17 years. Crazy. So where are they going to get their food? Well, the really cool thing, also not really cool for the plants, is that they have these little piercing mouth parts and they will suck the liquids out of the root systems, which is very similar to June bugs or 10-striped June beetles, which if you've seen that video already, then you already know that part. But if you haven't seen that video already, then you'll learn that soon. So they'll spend years down there until they decide, I'm ready to come up to the surface. And they will crawl and they will make their way up to the surface. And once they get up there, they will shed their exoskeletons. So very similar, again, to the praying mantis. The praying mantis is born as a little nymph, right? Looks like a praying mantis, but really small. And as it grows, the insides of it grows. But its exoskeleton, that hard, chitinous, almost like skin, but it's hard, that doesn't grow. So they have to kind of like push themselves out of it, harden their new exoskeleton, and then keep pushing themselves out of these exoskeletons until they can be like the big adult size. Well, the cicadas only push themselves out of their exoskeleton once, and they'll do it right after they've crawled out of the ground. They're like, I don't think I like my skin anymore. I'm going to just shed it. And so a lot of the times you'll see that these little shedded skins, which is kind of gross, but I love it, on the ground. Or sometimes they'll climb up to the trees, attach themselves onto the trees, and then push themselves out of their skin. Just kind of weird. So here's a couple of examples of those exoskeletons that I have in my bug collection. Also, just after I show you this, you can find the extra link that I've sent to your teachers of a video. I did not take this video. I found this video of someone who videotaped the actual process of the cicada bursting out of its exoskeleton, which is really cool.
Sure. Some of you are probably thinking, what is going on? Well, this is the exoskeleton. This is what that nymph-like cicada looks like until it decides that it's going to burst out, and then it just leaves the skin behind. So here is 1, 2, 3 examples of the exoskeleton. So this is from the top. It's very, you can see it's very papery almost. Here's it from the side. Again, those massive eye spots, but you can see that this one doesn't have big wings, but you can see a wing canal there. So that must be where the wings were held. It's from the bottom. I like this specimen the best because you can really kind of get a idea of what on earth is going on there. So we'll go from this nymph stage to popping out of its exoskeleton to looking like this. So you can see the body shape is really similar. This one just has big wings and it is much larger.
So now the cicada's an adult. Well, it's really kind of a sad story in that it'll live, if it's an annual, again, underground for years, and will pop up, and that annual cicada might live 2 to 5 years. The periodical cicada will live so long underground, and just when it sees the light, 4 to 6 weeks later, it dies. So it only lives in its adult stage for about 4 to 6 weeks. And in that time, it's not sucking the juices out of the roots anymore. It's going to be eating the foliage or the vegetation, leaves and maybe some fruits from the tops of the plant or the trees. And they'll drink the sap from they're still drinking, but it's not from the roots, it's from the shoots this time. And it's less devastating to the plant. So the cicada nymphs, when they're underground, could pretty much, if there's enough buried in one place or burrowed in one place, could totally kill a large plant because it's totally destroying the root system. Whereas the adult cicada doesn't eat much for a long period of time, so it probably can't really devastate a whole tree. Now, cicadas are best known for their wonderful songs. They are the opera singers of the insect world. But scientists wouldn't really call it opera singing. They would call it vocalizations. And they are loud vocalizations. Now, we know that some insects do make noises. We do hear some squeaks sometimes. The 10-striped June beetle will make that funny little hissing. Even though they call it a hiss, it mostly sounds like a squeak. But the cicadas are truly incredible in what they can create. Apparently, their vocalizations can reach 120 decibels in a group. So 120 decibels as a group making this noise is louder than a chainsaw. I have this chart in front of me here, which is actually pretty interesting. It apparently is the equivalent of a sports crowd, a rock concert, or a loud symphony. And I would like to say it's as loud as a rock concert, and that they are the stars of the show because they're truly incredible, again, in their noise. I will link another video for your teachers to see, or for you to see from your teachers. Again, I did not take this video, but you can hear in the background just how loud the vocalizations are. So in areas where they are common, there'll be months out of the year where there's just this really loud background noise of cicada calls at all times. And I've traveled a lot in my life, and I feel very fortunate to do so. And a lot of the places I've traveled have had cicadas. One of the places was Greece. Now, this is kind of a digression here, but my father's side of the family is Greek. And we would spend the summers seeing my grandparents who lived there. And I remember we'd stay for about a month. And the whole time, you get used to it after a while, but when you first get there, you're like, whoa, what is that noise? They're so loud. And you're trying to have a conversation, but you kind of, at least my brain does, wanders off and is like, I gotta go find these guys. And then, of course, after a month, you get used to it, and it becomes this, humming in the background. But when you get back home, whoa, it's so quiet. Where are all the bugs singing to me? Kind of sounds, it's similar to how we have really loud crickets here, but they don't buzz all the time. So the funny thing too is that only the males will vocalize, and they'll do this for two reasons. They will sing their wonderful ballads to attract a female so that they can make babies, make more cicadas. Or they will do it to send an alarm to fellow cicadas. So if there's a predator nearby, if there's a Miss Adrian coming and poking at them, they'll be like, what? There's someone here poking me. And they'll tell all their friends about it. The last thing that I want to mention about cicadas is that cultures all over the world, especially ancient or early cultures, viewed the cicada as both this symbol of purity and a symbol of kind of a spiritual symbol or religious symbol of birth, death, and rebirth, right? So especially the Chinese, the ancient Greeks, the ancient Romans, they would see, this nymph is born, and then it goes underground. And now we know that it's just thriving underground for 5 to 17 years. But I don't think they fully realized that. So they're thinking, oh, the cicada's gone into the underworld. And then it reemerges sheds its old skin and is now this like magnificent winged creature that sings or screams, whichever one you think it does. So they saw this as like a perfect metaphor for spirituality, for religion, which is pretty cool. Now, the Chinese emperors, I guess, of early China. The article I read didn't say the time period, but it did say early Chinese folklore. And they got this from National Geographic, and I thought it was very interesting. Cicadas were considered so high status that the emperors would emulate, I guess, their I don't know if it was like putting, embroidered pictures of cicadas on their robes, or if it was like the colors of the cicada were on their robes, but they thought that the cicadas just emulated or just, exhibited purity, and then the emperors wanted to emulate or copy that purity and say, "Hey, I'm a really good emperor." And they'd like show off their robes with cicada symbolism in their robes, which I thought was really cool. We don't really put insects or emulate or copy insects on our clothes these days, but I really like the idea of doing that. And that's sometimes maybe I wish why we had a time machine so we could go back and it would be socially acceptable to put bugs on our clothes. All right, that is all for cicadas. I hope you enjoyed. Until next time, friends.